extraordinary times, and I'm sure that none of us has ever experienced circumstances such as these. And it is important that we demonstrate good practice and civic leadership in our statements and in our behaviours. The setting aside of political differences in recent days has made me extremely proud to be an elected member of this council. Whatever our different views have been, and will be again in future, it is evidence of our commitment to the people of Dumfries and Galloway that we have a shared determination to deal with this crisis together, to protect lives, people and jobs. I am also extremely proud of our citizens who are coming together and supporting each other in every community. Our role is not to get in the way of that, but to enable and support them to do what they do best. Of course, our role is also to support our NHS colleagues in their very difficult job in reducing harm to public health. Can I just say, I was asked whether or not we could reverse the items 4 and 5. No, sorry, items 3 and 4. I want to take the actual decision first. The reason for that is I know that maybe not everybody is going to be comfortable about not socially isolating, because we're not socially isolated when we're here, and it's enabled people to take the decision, and if they would feel more comfortable leaving at that point, then that they can leave at that point. If not, there will be the opportunity to ask our officers a number of questions about the very much changing situation. Nick, could you provide the sederant and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Leader. We have apologies from councillors Doogie Campbell, McCammon, Surtees, Dempster, Tate, Young, Hagman, Marshall and Charteris. We have 29 members present at the start of the meeting. Just to say we have 4 members listening to the proceedings via an audio link through Skype, and their councillors Surtees, Hagman, Doogie Campbell and Jackie McCammon.
Councillor Maitland?
Apology from Councillor Howie.
And Councillor Drysdale?
Apologies from Councillor Blake.
And from Councillor Stubb. Good. Okay, do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? I would doubt it, but okay, thanks. Okay, our first report, therefore, is to put in place the necessary arrangements for our council to deal with this situation. In line with good practice and without wishing to curtail debate, could I ask members to be mindful of the need to keep our gathering as short as possible, or as short as is appropriate today? We are putting in place this emergency subcommittee to ensure that formal decision-making is as responsive and efficient as it needs to be. However, we must ensure that we are operating transparently and that all elected members have the opportunity to contribute to the decision-making process. The subcommittee would be put in place for as short a time as possible because it is recognised that one of the strengths of our decision-making arrangements is the expertise and experience of members in thematic issues and also at a local level. I am confident that whoever the members of the subcommittee are, that they will take appropriate soundings from colleagues and ensure that they are fully informed. It will also deal only with limited reports, issues that are urgent or important. The majority of business will be rescheduled until the subcommittees and the committees and subcommittees resume. We are also taking this opportunity to accelerate arrangements for remote participation in meetings. It is our intention that these arrangements will continue once normal business is resumed. It is clear that councils across the country are putting in place similar decision-making arrangements. I know officers are in touch daily with a number of neighbouring councils, and I believe that the proposals here evidence best practice about the wider involvement of all members. Liz Manson is here to assist members with any questions, so I'm going to open up to members' questions and debate. Councillor Crowthers.
No, so like yourself, I'd like to thank yourself firstly for calling this meeting. I think it's the appropriate thing to do. I would also like to thank the other political group leaders within the council who have acted very, very professionally. Politics have been set to the side, and I think it's the right stance to take. Public health ultimately is the main issue that we're looking at, but ultimately we have to be absolutely sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to have a sustainable economy as we actually go forward. So taking that into consideration, we've spoke at quite great detail as the weeks went forward, aware of what's in here. We spoke as a group as well. The main points that's come up for us is mentioned yesterday in regards to some of the wording in paragraph 3.4, I think it is. So the level of discretion the chair has in regards to members being able to set. I just wondered if you've had a look at that. I can rehearse that again if you wish, but we did think, should that be an absolute right to members, or should it be left to the discretion of the chair at the time? I think the way we can use substitutes is absolutely appropriate. It allows all members actually to become active, have an active role within that committee if needed at that particular time, if there's a particular skill set. But no, and also like yourself, like to thank the staff, the way they're working. I think they're behaving very well. It's very much a serious situation we're at. But I mean, I suppose apart from that point, ultimately, and communications is the big thing that's come up from our group, and speaking cross party as well. The communications absolutely have to be 100% right here. So I wondered if we could have got maybe something that Liz could have expanded on. Okay, the communications and members I'm talking about in particular at this moment in time. How will that line of communication happen? How will they keep up to speed in particular? I maybe come back to yourself, Leader, in regards to the kind of moot point. It's the level of discretion. If we have to leave that there, why do we have to leave that there when it comes to substitution?
Myself, I've actually had this in Parliament, had similar discussions, because I think it's actually a sort of legal phraseology, but I've sometimes, when it comes to legislation, may is used when you think actually it should be will that was used. And that, I personally don't have any issue at all about substituting will for may, but maybe you would we need to take some sort of advice about the...
Thank you. Yes, with regard to the virtual approach, I mean, you'll appreciate that this is new territory for our council, and it may well be that we just need to take a measured approach to this. So that's why there's no absolute guarantee. We need to make sure that the equipment is right, that we're comfortable that the elected members participating in that way are able to do so and have had the appropriate training and support. So I think it was really just to take a measured approach to that rather than giving an absolute guarantee that it will be happening for all meetings from now on. So that was why the approach. But clearly the idea would be that the chair will allow that if it's at all possible, and if we can be confident that the meeting will be run and decisions will be taken appropriately. With regard to the question about the information flow, we will be moving forward in as much a business as usual as possible in terms of the way that the subcommittee is being run. So the papers will be published in the usual way, they'll be online, and our approach is that if members choose to do so, and you might not want to, or you might choose to do it through your representatives on the subcommittee, but there would be an opportunity for you to identify any questions or any comments that you have on the papers. So that the reports will be public in exactly the same way that we run all meetings just now.
Rob?
Thank you, Leader. I would echo the comments that have been made and appreciate the collegiate spirit in which members have set out to address the very unusual circumstances we find ourselves in. I think it's important to remember that however challenging these are, we are a very strong region with many resilient communities. And for every incidence of bad behaviour, these are being far outweighed by the evidence of kindness and community spirit that we're seeing across the region. We must help with that, and I think that will be critical for the business of the council going forward. My question is one of clarification, which is raised by one of our members who's listening in, and it related to the process of review that the subcommittee will undertake on a monthly basis. That would strike me as being sensible, because clearly this is a moving situation, and its duration can't be certain at this point. I wanted to just get some clarity on the relationship between that review and the statutory meeting, which at the moment we are required to hold on the 25th of June as regards the accounts. Will that meeting, if it goes ahead, and of course I guess that will be dependent on any legislative changes that come forward, will that meeting review the overall operation and purpose of the subcommittee and whether we would require to go back to business as usual at that point? I think we would all hope we would. So in effect, are there essentially two review mechanisms there, if you follow me?
You'll see in paragraph 315 the intention that there'll be an update on the Council's response to COVID-19 on each agenda, and as part of that, any guidance that we're getting about gatherings and meetings would form part of that. So as soon as there were any restrictions lifted, then the subcommittee would be in a position to say, yes, we can resume our normal committees and subcommittees.
So if I could come back with your leave, Leader, just for clarification then. So on the basis of the advice that we continue to get and monitor, the subcommittee would effectively rule itself out of existence, so to speak, and we would return to the normal business that the council is accustomed to.
Yes, that's a very neat way of putting it.
Councillor James?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. 313, it's intended the subcommittee will meet and determine urgent and important business for the duration of the period. How far down will its remit go, and there are lots of decisions which won't be made, or will they be delegated to officers, or even, let's say, right down to, let's say, a common good committee that thought that it would like to help out some local businesses as an emergency action or something like that? How would that type of decision made, or would that even qualify as an important or urgent decision?
Generally, the designation of urgent and important is where, by not taking a decision, there would be a risk to the council. Looking at some of the other council arrangements, Glasgow City, for example, have talked about failure to act would result in hardship for any party. So it is a matter of judgment. There are delegations in your scheme of delegations to officers where they have to use their professional judgment about where something is important. It would be a risk to the council not to take a decision. And in terms of urgent, that would generally be about statutory timescales. But as also said in the paper, there is work going on at the moment across the professional advisors about certain issues which have got statutory timescales that perhaps need to be amended or relaxed. The Deputy Leader highlighted one, which is the approval of the draft annual accounts at the end of June. There are others, for example, freedom of information, timescales, etc. So there is quite a significant list currently being drawn up by the professional advisors on a national basis of areas where there should or could be some relaxation, which would allow us to have fewer urgent items.
Then I suppose the second part of my question is, what about all other business? How will it be handled?
Where at all possible, the business will be continued until the committees and subcommittees are re-established.
Minor decisions can or cannot be made.
I think that's where the judgment of the professional officer needs to come into it. Would it cause, that sort of phraseology about would it cause hardship to a partner? So I can't be definitive about any particular decision. It's a matter for judgment of the professional officers.
Sorry, I was thinking about small decisions. They just won't be looked at, or delayed, or can they be delegated to officers?
I think that's where it's difficult to give a general view about what's a small decision, because it might be urgent, it might be important.
Anything that's not urgent then, because you've explained that. I fully understand the subcommittees for urgent decisions, and there are the important ones we need to make. I just wondered if there's any other decision making possible, and how that would be handled in this period.
The scheme of delegation to officers gives a quite a clear set of arrangements.
No, and other matters will be rescheduled. If they're not urgent, they'll be rescheduled. Okay, any further questions? Oh, Councillor Drysdale.
Thanks very much, Leader. It's the planning and licensing matter, and again, I want to echo what everybody else has said about the communities across Dumfries and Galloway coming together and supporting those most in need at this particular time. But obviously, planning and licenses are important for some of the businesses in the area. I'm just wondering how soon how soon that would be actually decided. I understand that in some cases, for instance, in licensing matters for pub licensing, that the conveners of the licence can actually do some work on their own, obviously informing the panel members of what's going on. But I think there's opportunities here that we can use.
You're absolutely right that there may be some greater delegations that are put in place to deal with these. Again, there's a lot of traffic at the moment nationally about what's happening to make sure there's consistency across the country. But it's certainly recognised that we need to make some decisions within the emergency arrangements in each council.
Nick just advised me that actually the subcommittee would have delegated authority to change some of the schemes as well. So if that was necessary, that needs to be done in order to ensure that urgent planning matters are determined. We would be able to do that. I suppose the only problem there is actually about you do have to have training in order to determine planning matters. And it may be, maybe that people who have that training, but maybe not everybody would have done. Councillor Crothers?
We spoke about that this morning at our group, planning in particular, but we do think through the substitution, the use of substitution, that could be overcome, because we could use any member of the council who could actually sit on it, so therefore whether it's planning, licensed civic government or licensed board kind of sits to the side, but I hope the conveners have got enough discretion that they can make them decisions on their own.
Councillor Wood?
Thank you, Leader. It's with regard to 3.4. It's just the wording where it says the chair may allow any member of the council. Surely it should read the chair will allow any member of the council.
I think Liz asked that earlier, and answered that earlier actually.
It's because at the moment we may not have the sort of reliable technology, or we may not have members who have been trained or are familiar with the technology. So at the moment it's in that proposal to make sure so that the chair is confident that the business of the meeting is going to be run effectively.
Ian had mentioned that in his question. Anything further? Okay, are we happy to move to the recommendations? And the first one being that we agree to amend Standing Order 8.6 to allow for greater use of virtual participation in council meetings as set out in paragraph 3.4. Okay. And do we agree to add to the scheme of administration delegation to committees at section 6.6 to provide for the establishment of an ad hoc COVID-19 subcommittee of full council as set out in paragraph 3.10 to 3.15? Great. And do we agree to suspend the delegations to committees and subcommittees as set out in section 5.157 and section 6 of the scheme of administration and delegation to committees until further notice, with a review by the subcommittee on a monthly basis? Great. And we agree to suspend section 12.2 non-statutory exclusions and add the subcommittee to the list of bodies in section 16.2 which are excluded from the provision of recall within 48 hours, consistent with the purpose of the subcommittee to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, as set out in paragraph 3.19. Okay. We're to note that under the scheme of delegation to officers, the proper officer intends to cancel all other full council committees and subcommittees with immediate effect on a rolling basis, as set out in paragraph 3.20, until such time as a subcommittee reviews the position. Right. And finally, to agree the arrangements for the engagement of all members of the council and other representatives in committee and other business during the suspension of standing orders and the operation of the new subcommittee as set out in paragraph 3.22 to 3.25. Okay. And just to say on that, the subcommittee will meet a week today, which means that the papers will come out on Monday and they will be available for all members to see them. And therefore, we need, the proper officer actually needs the names of the delegates from each of the groups as soon as possible. So if you're able to do that today, that would facilitate it. Okay, now, as I say, the second item, if people don't feel comfortable about being in this room with loads of other people, then they don't feel that you're obliged to stay for this bit. Our second item is an update on the COVID-19. Key to this, I think, is clarity about our council's contribution. Clearly, NHS, Dumfries and Galloway and the Health and Social Care Partnership are the lead in relation to the medical and health protection issues. Therefore, firstly, we need to support that work, and the Deputy Leader and myself gave a commitment at the Community Planning Partnership Board that we would assist the Health Board and the IJB however we can. Secondly, we must maintain lifeline services, and our officers are responding quickly to ensure that the essential services are available, recognising that some staff will be unavailable due to COVID-19 and caring responsibilities, and we want to release staff to assist with the crisis. Thirdly, we have this week been asked by our health colleagues to take the lead in community support work. Our expertise in supporting local groups and our most vulnerable people in terms of poverty, homelessness and minority groups will be invaluable. We are already involved in ensuring people have food through holiday hunger programmes and in Fair Share. And so we and our third sector partners are building on a sound foundation. And finally, we have a lead role in the recovery of our region, keeping companies and social enterprises in business and people in jobs. As an employer, we are fortunate to be able to guarantee salaries for all our employees, but that is not the case for many of our small and medium-sized private sector businesses who are already experiencing enormous challenges. In all of these roles, we need to work with partners, and again, we have a good track record of relationships and successes that give us confidence we will come through. We are more fortunate in Dumfries and Galloway than in some other areas. The cough I've had since 15th of February, I can tell you, please don't worry about it. Our NHS has a new single-bedroomed hospital, and we also have a former hospital building in Dumfries, parts of which can be recommissioned should that be necessary. Unlike some other local authorities, we still have 2% or 6.8 million in our general reserves. And most importantly, we have strong, resilient communities in which, during times of trouble over the decades, people have demonstrated their ability to come together and support each other. Gavin will give us the overview of the national position and the recent Scottish Government announcements, particularly about funding streams. I think Heather Collington will provide an update on our arrangements for caring for our most vulnerable older people. Gillian Bryston will provide an update on the schools position, and Richard Greaveson will outline the Council's emergency planning arrangements, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions and discussion. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. We meet in extraordinary times, and the first thing I would like to do is just recognise the hard work that's been put in by staff across the public sector. My enormous respect for the work that our NHS colleagues are doing just now, and in particular in this council, the way our staff have stood up has been exemplary across the council. In particular, I'd like to pay credit to Heather and social work colleagues who have been trying to do 2, if not 3 jobs for the last 4 weeks as they work with health colleagues to develop the process and yet still keep the show on the road. And certainly we're very much in their debt. In particular as well, I'd like to recognise the work that Richard Greaveson and Mark Thompson have done, particularly in the resilience agenda and trying to move from a cold start to the position where I think that the structures were put in place at Leading Scotland, that hasn't been without many, many, many long hours of work. So I'd like to put that on record. I think the headline I'd like to say to everybody, to put it in context, and I'm delighted the members took the decision earlier, that 12 weeks, the number that's being emphasised just now, is only to the top of the bell curve. Those of you who are not used to talking about bell curves, basically it's the shape of a bell. We'll get to the top of that bell in 12 weeks, and that's best estimate. But there'll still be a long tail beyond that. During that period, people will die. And I think that's the start message. People that we know will die. And therefore, what we need to do is put arrangements in place that can stand the marathon, potentially 3 to 6 months. Even when we get to the end of the immediate crisis, public servants will be exhausted. We'll be relying even more heavily on community resilience and volunteers, and also how do we support our businesses to recover. I think for me, if I wanted to give a steer to members, and particularly all members, you're the eyes and ears in your communities when they're in trouble. That's why leading in community for the council, where we have that outreach, is absolutely important. But also I think members should be focusing on recovery, immediate support for business, but a lot of that will be directed coming from government. But actually having that longer term strategic view of how we recover out of this. What's going to be important is when the businesses are able to survive through the 12, 14-week period, we have had a foresight in how we then support them to recover from that point on. The stuff around people dying, the difficult decisions we'll have to take, we are well organised around that, and much of that will just happen. I think members' activity and support on being able to keep us real, because we can tend to focus down, but also in that longer term, where is it 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, we need to be building. And certainly when Richard explained some of the structures to you, that should really be, I think, a key focus about that recovery. as well as just making sure we have businesses to recover at the back end. If I can talk about national structure, I think it's important because many of you will not quite know how this works in Scotland. At the top of it, we have the First Minister leading something called SCORE, Scottish Government Resilience Team, and it's the Scottish version of what you'd have here as COBRA, but the Prime Minister on the television. So SCORE is meeting on a daily basis, sending out information, which unfortunately I'm not legally allowed to share, but it comes out on a daily basis, sets out the national position. Below SCORE, there is something called, there's the government, but below that there is a series of things called, there's 3 regional resilience partnerships, in which all the Category 1 bodies, all the big public bodies, energy, utilities, etc., sit around that group to coordinate on a regional. So we're part of the West, which is basically Strathclyde and Dumfries and Galloway, is a nice way to put it. Below that, there are 32 mirroring local authorities, local resilience partnerships. So if I concentrate now down there for you, what we have is that local resilience partnership splits into 2 levels. One, there is the gold command level. That's meeting this afternoon following this meeting, which basically the Chief Executive of the Health Service, myself, Director of Public Health, the Divisional Commander for Police, sit around there taking the life and death decisions basically around the future of Dumfries and Galloway. That's a statutory function under the Civil Contingencies Act. Below that, there is a silver group, which many of our officers are involved in, which is the tactical operational group, trying to feed in all the intelligence, the hotspots and the planning. And as we move into the emergency, we're only at the very early days. I describe it as the first day of flooding. We're all running around and move into emergency. That tactical group really becomes the, how do we deal with a care home suddenly getting an outbreak? How do we deal with having to lock down a community? So that's where, again, very close liaison with the subgroup that you've agreed to establish will be important. Below that, there are specific things of business as usual. So a lot of the arrangements, Richard leader will explain to you, is how we keep much of the business as usual, but it needs to be sustainable. Over the next 12 weeks, we will start to have fewer and fewer and fewer resources to available. So what we build now needs to shrink. So the structure needs to hold, but the people and resources need to shrink. Some of that we can fill with volunteers, but a lot of what will rely on, if you think about it, there's a lot of jobs only 1 or 2 people can do. So we need to have a structure and training to do that. The other issue is how do we at pace move our staff as they start to free up, like the 300 staff that moved off of leisure and the decision I took this week. How do we free them into areas of need, match them as a dating service? There's terms and conditions, there's job descriptions, there's a whole raft of issues that we need to sort out as well. But how do we take the goodwill of those people and move them to where we need? In particular now, the demand of health to fill core jobs as we're trying to set up a second hospital, reprovision many elements of the hospital in Mountain Hall, and across and expand cottage hospitals in our localities. So again, that's what that we'll be taking decisions on this afternoon in the local resilience partnership of how we're able to move that across. But even saying that, by week 10, we will not have enough people to service that. So therefore, we need to be mobilising our communities, and that's critical, mobilising our communities to take some of that burden off of the normal provision. I mean, I'll give you a very simple example. At the moment, we have staff out supporting low-level care, putting microwaves to ensure a vulnerable feed. We have to be able to transfer that to a different model over the next few weeks because we physically won't have those staff as numbers needing more intensive care grow. So again, those are the decisions, operational decisions that we're going to have to just do on a daily basis. We're not in a great position as we know our care services, and I look to Councillor Ferguson, Chair of the IGB, we're running full just now. We have no spare capacity. So what we're having to do, and why we've been working endless hours, is trying to create capacity to deal with what we know is going to hit us in a couple of weeks' time. We're a good, I'd say England's 2 weeks off, really starting to get serious numbers. We're 3 weeks in Scotland. It's not just the weather that changes at a different rate, but probably 3 weeks off. But in that we've a small window to create capacity. And of course, that isn't helped by conflicting messages coming out from the press And again, the stockpiling issue for food has been a real issue for us to try and deal with, because it's diverting key resources onto issues that we shouldn't be looking at this time. And again, there's some work we can lead on. I think perhaps to say that we have good officers, we need to plan while we've got them, we need to plan for what we're going to do when we don't have them, and we need a very close working relationship at senior level with the subgroup, so that we're kept real. Decisions can be taken at pace that can only be taken by the subgroup, but you're also informed of decisions that are critical to your community, so you can communicate back to all members into their community or community leaders and get there. And again, we have a week, I think, next week to establish what I would refer to in emergency planning terms as the battle rhythm. It's almost the Martin's back in the room, isn't it? A battle rhythm to get us into that point, to move on from there. I'll come on to some headline and funding, and if I could ask, Leader, if Steve, I think, has been doing some work this morning, because it's a very fast-moving situation, give a bit more detail, Steve, if you can. But where we are, and I think the first thing to say, that initial identification, and this has come out this morning, the NHS are going to need close on $1 billion in Scotland to recover from this. At the moment, the initial spend is 20 million in NHS in Scotland. That's just for additional social care capacity, very early stages. But we're looking at early projections. It will cost £1 billion to get us out of here. But that's not factoring in staff will be exhausted. So that's the initial indication. That's just the NHS. So I think, again, we start to see some of the serious number. The government, to its credit, reacted to the Westminster announcements and announced an additional £2.2 billion package, but the £300 million, there's £350 million specifically coming to councils, charities, businesses and community groups. And that's in addition to the headline from Westminster. They're still trying to work through what some of it might mean. And again, Steve, I don't know if you've got the details of the numbers of how they're going to come through, but certainly there's hardship funding, Scottish Welfare Fund, food funds, wellbeing funds, support for community funds. And part of what we're going to have to do is, how does that money get distributed so we don't spend it all in a rush, and actually, as this marathon starts to layer on us, we'll need more. We assume we'll get more coming through the system, but at some point, everything we'll have will be out there. So I think, again, to come from there. More will come today. You know that the Chancellor is standing today, critically for our region, to talk about how we support businesses to not lay off staff. Every one of us is affected by relatives, friends, family, who are staring at, will I have a job because nobody is in my cafe, nobody is in my business. And therefore, if the initial suggestion of the Scandinavian approach to 75% subsidies for wages is there, we can keep them. Now, it might be those staff then are released by companies to work for us because there's nothing for them to do. Therefore, I think that immediately starts to say, and certainly we've been approached by many companies saying, even if I have a subsidy, I won't be able to, I won't physically have anything for them to do. Can we assist? And I know Derek and I have had a couple of emails this morning of companies saying, we've got all this equipment, all these people, if you need us, come and get us. And I think, again, that's very the Bruce and Galloway for us. We're also having to gear up the coordination and resilience. And I've just been told this morning that the government's agreed that a multi-agency coordinating centre has been convened starting from Monday. And that's really to try to coordinate this hugely complex process, recognising that the public health focus on health is great, but actually how we're going to coordinate the business response. And what it's to do is by greater cohesion, collaboration and mutual aid for business contingency and national COVID strategy. That is going to be chaired by the Chief Constable through the police process, because they've got the ability to do it. And we'll have all the main partners sitting around the table. And again, that's going to really help us. If that had been in place, it might have been easier around the funding announcement to have understood how that, we could have moved quicker, I think, around that. And that's really why Cabinet have agreed to set one up. Subject to members' approval, I've been asked if I would represent local government as an entire family around that group to support, particularly to lead on the move to recovery. for Scotland at the back end of it. And again, subject to members' approval, you know, I think given the fact I chair the Scottish Resilience Partnership, it would be logical, given my experience around it, to represent local government, particularly to try to be focusing, as I said, on 6 months, 3 months from now, rather than the immediate energy. But again, you know, that's just a folding. It's only just come through from government just now. But I think, again, it shows the fast-moving pace that, you know, we started with schools might close, schools might have closed, we're going to have exams, we're not going to have exams. And again, if you take that to all the areas we've talked about, that's how quickly this will move, and why the subgroup the members have taken is going to be important. With your indulgence, Leader, I just wonder if Steve could give us a bit more detail perhaps on some of what we know about the funding announcement at this point, and perhaps some of the communication we want to start putting out to business around this at this point.
Steve?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Gavin. Gavin's asked me to head up the local economic response to this emergency situation. So our first priority will be to ensure that the government support that has been announced for the small business community is dealt with as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, it's clear that that support is going to be channeled through local authorities, and we're already working on putting in place processes to make sure that we're able to deal with that and distribute it as quickly as we possibly can. Just to fill in a little bit of the detail around that, it's a combination of reliefs associated with business rates, with non-domestic rates, where there will be a reduction applied to all business premises of 1.6 in terms of their requirement to pay rates for next year. So that will be done automatically. Businesses don't need to apply for that. In addition to that, there will be some very specific targeted reliefs aimed at businesses, small businesses within specific sectors. So those sectors are retail, hospitality, and leisure businesses. And in addition to additional rates reliefs, businesses within those sectors will be eligible for a one-off grant of 25,000, provided they occupy premises with a rateable value of between 18,000 and 51,000. So there's some quite clear parameters that have been given to us at the moment by government. In addition, a one-off grant will also be available to all small businesses who qualify currently for one of a number of different reliefs, including the small business bonus scheme relief. So again, those grants will be available irrespective of sector to very small businesses. The detail on this is still being developed by government. The scheme will become effective on 1st of April. So we've got another 2.5 weeks to make sure that we've got those robust processes in place. As Gavin has already said, it's now important that we start the communication plan to engage with our partner organisations, and also to start advising local businesses of the fact that this relief is going to be available to them and how to go about getting it. In fact, we're already receiving a number of inquiries from business owners in a really quite a degree of distress currently. That's why it's so important that we get this support to them as quickly as we can. So we've been engaging with the Chamber of Commerce. We've been engaging with the Economic Leadership Group. I've also had conversations with the newly appointed Director of Operations at the South of Scotland Agency, because it's going to be important that we work carefully in partnership with all of those organisations to make sure that between us we're able to provide a comprehensive response to this situation. It's very clear that given some of the parameters that government have put around this funding, there will be businesses who are not eligible and don't qualify for the government support. So we now need to start that conversation with our other partner agencies to see how those businesses can be supported between that partnership of agencies.
I'll take questions for Gavin and Steve now. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Steve, I know there is a lot of small businesses out there and some of them are in distress now. They can't wait until even days. There's a business a local business that's laying off 30 people. Some of these people, a lot of them are part-time and, maybe as well as the full-time ones. But they're laying off people now. And because they haven't got any money, or they don't foresee any money coming, and is there anything we can do for businesses like that? Or through the council, I mean, we talked about reserve just now, is there anything we can actually start doing on the basis that we're going to get something through in the 1st April?
Essentially, at the moment, we're able to provide them with some advice and support. Business Gateway are continuing to provide a support scheme to local businesses and encouraging them to, where possible, hold off from making tough decisions until such time as they know they can get access to this money.
I think the problem is, and it's sorry, Leader. I think the problem is this is happening now, so hanging off isn't an option for some businesses, and they're making decisions now that might have a long-term impact and will have a long-term impact on people's employment. So, is there any
question is, would the council be able to provide a short-term loan until the money from the government comes through?
I mean, that's certainly something that we could look at, and I think the other issue that needs to be escalated here is around these timescales. I think we are feeding back to government the concerns that are coming to us from local businesses who, as you say, need access to this funding now. Is there any way in which this could be accelerated?
So is that the same issue?
Yeah, just very briefly on that. There's a lot of discussion going on nationally for obvious reasons. There are some issues around state aid, and that's one that was why I was shaking my head at that point. But we're trying to get round some of those issues. That if we can release funding, we will. But obviously, the state aid issue is a little bit of an issue, bureaucratic issue, but it's there.
Okay, Councillor Crum.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's a general question. I think if you're saying questions also for Gavin at this moment in time, you can either answer it now or answer it later. It's one I put to the Chief Officer of the Integration Joint Board. I think it's important. So we're sitting here, we get a good update, we understand what's happening on the ground, and I would imagine, like the points that we made here, probably be on the agenda for next Friday's meeting, possibly. How do we best make sure that local economy can benefit via whatever mechanisms the council has? So taking that into consideration, sitting here as elected member, you're at the forefront of this, Gavin, along with your team. You're dealing with this on a daily basis, working in partnership with other different agencies, and you probably will escalate to a higher level. How do we as members help facilitate you get the highest level of productivity so we can benefit both the public health and obviously keeping the economy sustainable in this area? What can we do as from your view as elected members to help support you?
Firstly, avoid small normal stuff coming in. We just don't have capacity to deal with it. I think from a member support, I think the subgroup's critical to be able to feed in the temperature from all elected members about issues that are starting to bubble so that we can get ahead of it. I think that's absolutely critical that the subgroup does that. I think, again, even for the subgroup, we don't need extensive papers for the subgroup to debate the issue and take a decision. I think if we could have enough to satisfy legal requirements, but actually some of the decisions you'd want to take are being based on reacting to, just as Councillor Nicholson said just now, an issue that's just emerged, the release of the funds. And I think for me, the focus on the economy would be perhaps the biggest help, because a lot of our energies as senior officers are going to be on the life and limb end. And therefore, if you could be helping to focus on the economy, moving at pace, taking verbal briefings and taking a decision that we can document, That's the biggest help, I think, because it does take, even a single paper can take an officer 2 to 3 days to write, and that's not best use of their time when you can have an open dialogue. I do think for all members, and even those that aren't here, that ability to feed into the members of the subgroup, that intelligence, that there's an emerging issue around care, around something in your community that we can deal with head on before it becomes something that eats our resources. But I think, again, that would be absolutely the support that we would need. But actually, I'm quite, knowing members, I think that that's something we can easily do and have that pace. I think it's about pace. There are people going to be struggling and in need out there, and the ability for us to be able to move and exercise the council's responsibilities at pace is something that perhaps will become over bureaucratic about, and therefore if the idea that members of the citizen subgroups, that's the biggest help to us, to be able to develop an ability to move at pace, but you still be feeding in from all members that intelligence and that temperature seeking would be the best thing you could do.
Councillor Brodie?
Thanks, Leader. Obviously, businesses, self-employed people, and people who have jobs are at threat or have lost their jobs need help now. So I think the sooner we can get something in place, the better. Obviously, lots of people have just received their council tax bills, and they're worried how they're going to pay it. So, from a council point of view, could we look at delaying or deferring payments, because it's going to affect people who've found themselves in dire financial straits now?
Sorry, I think that's an excellent point. I think one of the key pieces of work we need to do that our people will just vote with their feet and not do it and end up having a trail. I think it's absolutely essential that it's the dialogue between the individual. It's not a case of saying just don't pay it. Have a dialogue with us and we will work our way through. And if it means stop it, then we know about it. I think the worst thing that can happen is if everybody just stops paying. So again, that's a communication that through Steve and Paul Garrett we will work on. We're having an SLT immediately following this, so I can take both this council's decision and what we need to do into the Gold Command LRP. And again, I think that's one that we could perhaps move on immediately following this meeting.
Yeah, at the moment, people are phoning up about their council tax and saying, well, we can't defer it. So I think we need to get the message out there that we are going to be sympathetic to this.
Subject to, and I'll keep looking to Gail, subject to the legal ability to do it is something that we are considering just now. So again, we can preempt it on the presumption that if I do end up in court, members will support me.
Councillor Bell.
Leader, if it would be helpful, just on that point. Scottish Government and COSLA are now discussing council tax relaxations, but I think one of the crucial things is that councils get information to households should their income reduce to a level where they would be entitled to a relief anyway. So I think there's two stages to it, that we need to inform households that are going to have a serious drop in income and enable them to get the relief they're entitled to. And we're looking at the wider, because obviously there will be financial implications for us.
Isabel.
Thanks, Leader. We're certainly facing very, very difficult times, probably biggest crisis probably from the Second World War. Looking at, obviously, Gavin, you mentioned the skills sector. As I'm self-employed, I have a number of people over 70 working for me at present at the moment. They're in isolation. What concerns me is, obviously, we've mentioned here about the skill set, but a number of people from the council will be off with the illness. We really need to be looking to the private sector as well. There's a number of people who have been laid off work or imminently be out of a job. They're looking to take on painters and decorators. They're looking to take on some of these people who redeploy. Also, we need to be working with the NFU. I've been an NFU member for a number of years. I just sometimes wonder why I'm paying the subscription, but maybe this time they'll be able to work together. We need to be working with agriculture, because I have a number of staff off. I'm facing crisis as well. But one thing we haven't picked up in here, obviously, is obviously the lower interest rates here. I'm just wondering about maybe we should be looking into refinancing some more debt here, maybe different borrowing requirements across the council, rescheduling our debt completely, because an opportunity maybe make a saving here, so some of that saving could be possibly going to the general fund balances. I just wonder if that could be looked into.
The longer term projection isn't to keep it down. And obviously, most of our debt is through the Public Works Loan Board, but we certainly will be looking for that. Any opportunity that we can put money back into members to allow them to deal with the situation, we will. But at the moment, the longer term 5 to 10 year rate hasn't really changed much. But short-term stuff we might have on loan, there's really opportunities. So I think, again, we would look in all the relaxations to create the biggest reserve for members' discretion possible. We will be looking at, and obviously we'll bring early reports back to the next meeting of the subcommittee. But yeah, that's absolutely something we're looking at, how much can we free up from our available resources.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually been encouraged that people seem to be taking on board the urgency required for this economic help. I've had businesses on to me who are in dire straits, really, backing up what Councillor Nicholson was saying. They need help straight away, and I'm pleased that people are taking that on board. And I think the other thing going forward is how we get this information disseminated around the businesses. Because quite often, if people go through things like the Chamber or the Federation of Small Businesses, there are an awful lot of businesses do not engage with these organisations, and we need to have a means of contacting these people just to make sure they know what's available, because we will get through this crisis, and we've got to make sure that once we come out the other side, we still have an economy in Dumfries and Galloway. And we're going to take a big hit this summer with our tourism industry, our food and drink companies, and they're very important to Dumfries and Galloway. So I think it's crucial that we do act at speed and we contact as many people as we can.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you for letting us back in. And it's a question for Gavin, actually. And I'll bypass his description of the first day of flooding, especially after the email we got today. But just it's on the community resilience. You mentioned that what is part of your statement there, and we've already got a lot of people out there in the community that have actually hit the ground running through their networking abilities. They're getting in touch with each organisation themselves, and they've actually got things going for vulnerable people, for elderly, for kids, for others. And I think we need to put some resources into them types of organisations rather than reinvent the wheel. They know where the difficulties are, and they're actually dealing with them now on tight restraints, obviously. And obviously, organisations like that, they will have their own difficulties through sickness and other things as well. We have, we're shutting down leisure centres, we're shutting down libraries, and I know it won't be some kind of retraining, but if we can even get a few people into these organisations to help and support them, then they know the council structures, they know how to feed back into council structures, and they know what kind of different supports that they can be relied on to help them with.
A specific example, Leader, that Derek and I have been discussing, and I think about, we're again well served by having people like Kirsty Peden out there and building that world-working approach, is, around food. Let's face it, families will suffer through that in food. And actually, what we can do as we start to free staff up is put them directly into people like Food Train to give them additional money, because actually it's the best way for us to get real impact. So again, those conversations are being held with key groups. We're starting, as you'd expect, at the life and limb end, but working down. That's why over the next few weeks we'll get further down that. But certainly the food agenda, because obviously some of our models of delivering food and food banks are not social isolating. So there's a whole rat. So again, bringing our expertise and putting staff in there. And again, but our immediate response at this point has really been looking, how do we support our NHS colleagues? But as more staff come on stream, absolutely, it'll be staff and money. Small amounts of money given to those organisations will have huge local effects. So again, that's the type of discussion we'd want to have with the subgroup next week about the development of the model, bringing it down. But we'll bring proposals to that meeting, not just we're developing it. Because I think stuff around the food agenda, the poverty agenda, we need to be on now, so that we've got a framework out there to build upon. So again, that's a very good point that was made by Councillor Nicholson.
Okay, just to add on to that, at the moment, we've made a decision in schools, we're shutting schools just now, but obviously, there'll be parts of schools, I don't know what the structure is going to look like, or, who's going to be where for the vulnerable people. But in schools, you've actually got kitchens as well, and I don't know about free school meals, whether we're in vouchers, whether we're, but there are opportunities to work with these organisations as well. Through that basis.
I think Gillian, you'll be telling us a bit more about that in her presentation. Yeah, sorry. Councillor Wilson.
So I appreciate there's still some officers to speak, but so if this question isn't answered straight away, fine, if they could make sure they answer it. I think obviously, the advice that came through from the government, one of the earlier ones was about home working. And obviously Gavin had touched on the need to ensure we've still got the capacity as we get closer and closer to the curve. And I think one thing a couple of us noted on Monday, Tuesday when we were in is the number of cars still in the car park, sort of suggesting to us that, maybe particularly in these buildings where there is quite a significant admin-based work in terms of finance and HR, and actually how many of our staff have we got home working? Have we managed to get that happening as quickly as possible? I know that there's national organisations who as of Monday, everybody was working from home. For me, it's a bit about actually if we can have the majority of our staff who can, because obviously there will be some who are out in our communities and who it is physically impossible for them to be home working. But obviously, if we have more of our staff working from home, then that will make sure that capacity is still available as we get closer and closer to the curve. So I appreciate that, it will be a different story for teachers and for the general population of staff, but if we can just try and, understand sort of where we're at with home working, particularly how many of our staff are working from home, and certainly sort of the redeployment of staff.
Yeah, absolutely. From what we've been developing this week, if members can think back to when we had the bad weather, the storms and snow, we were producing a SITREP, which basically said geographically where are we. So we're going to start producing from next week that type of document, and key to that document, how many home workers have we got, as well as the stuff about clinical. Yes, we've been fully developing. Our finance team will almost be totally virtual, I think, by next week. So we'll have that information to share with members, but certainly we've been pushing people out into that home working environment where it's safe for the last few weeks. Also, there'll be decisions that I know that Lorna has been leading on about shrinking our estate and our democratic estate. I think Lorna can give us some detail just now around that. But you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, there is a range, having sat in a government 50-person teleconference, it doesn't work if you want to move at pace or to get it held. So in fact, again, it's how do you do that safely? Something I just wanted to mention about business. One of the biggest problems I've had is the message around social isolation. Actually, there are ways to support your local business. We must get a message out to support our local business in a sensible, social isolated way. A number of our small cafes, etc., are going out of business, when in fact, just do a takeaway. Don't forget about them. If they go, they're gone, in particular for rural areas. And I think a message I was discussing with Derek this morning was about how do we get it out. Please remember to try and support your local businesses in your village street as you can. Have conversations. Keep doing it, because actually I think that shock has been and also a factor that they took social isolation, that you don't go to the butchers. Actually, there are ways that we can do it. So it's how we sensitively get that message out, and it's a message Derek and his team will be getting out before close of play today about don't forget to support your local business in a sensible manner. Social isolation does not mean you just don't use your own local shops and phone Tesco. So I think again, and that's a thing we'll discuss with the Public Health Department this afternoon. But perhaps Lorna can give us more about some of the homeworking and business decisions we're going to have to take in the next week.
Thank you, Leader Gavin. So part of the work we've done this week in response to the government decisions around social distancing, particularly for those who are over 70, pregnant women and indeed people with underlying health conditions, is to prioritise our staff around those groups. We're gathering intel on that, but we moved to support those staff to work from home immediately where that's entirely possible. There are staff whose jobs don't allow that, but they were our priority on Tuesday to make sure we moved that out, and we've done that. The investments that members have led around our ICT have enabled us to move not even laptops, but we can move whole desktops. We're setting up business in people's houses, and that's been our priority in terms of deployment this week. As you will realise, a number of our buildings are office buildings, and we don't need them through this because people will not be here. We will need to take decisions on Monday about which offices we retain for business continuity and also for sustainability, to make sure staff are not all in the one place. We need to make regard to what the government's telling us around that. We obviously have to retain things like our contact centre and have resilience around that. We have to support care call. We have a 24/7 social care and people protection team in Irish Street that we'll need to support and make sure that can be retained. We have our stores and logistics and a lot of our support, practical support within Dumfries and for the wider region at Gareth. We'll also have to look at this campus because fundamentally these buildings are very difficult to keep clean. We've got staff in cleaning door handles on a daily basis. Public buildings will be shut. This is a public building, we'll need to look at that, but we'll come back to members around that early next week with a view that we would probably move our control centre in terms of the team that will coordinate and lead this on a 24/7 basis to the bridge. So we've already made plans in there, and Richard will be able to explain that a bit further. So that will be important both in terms of communication, support for members, support for communications going out, support for the NHS, because we'll be nearby for them as well, but also being able to give them mutual aid in terms of the new facilities that they'll have to open and expand. So a lot of our staff will have to help with that and the coordination of that, but also redeployment of staff and coordination of that on a daily basis. Once we know where things are happening and where need is, and deployment with our communities and third sector partners as well. So lots to do, and we need to be able to manage that. Well, when a dispersed staff group who are working from home and people who maybe work from home sometimes and come in other times, so that we have a kind of quite a sparse group of people, but keeping our resilience and keeping the resources going. So it's fast moving at this stage, and we'll start to report to members on a very regular basis about our staffing positions. We're gathering that information just now, and as Gavin said, provide that on a separate basis, probably on a daily basis.
Councillor Maitland.
Fortuitously, Lorna's actually touched on what I wanted to ask about, which is to say that the council is but one partner in this enterprise. We had a briefing for integration members, joint board members, which is very reassuring that the approach in D&G is that it's business as usual, in that the NHS and the public sector and third sectors are working together, and there was absolute assurance that that is going to happen. Elected members, though, need to know what's happening, and I would be very grateful if we could, at some stage, have sight of the communication strategy that's emerging from the gold or silver groups. I think it would be really important, because if there's one thing that people will be anxious about, it's feeling that they might possibly be missing out on some piece of information which they've got to have.
In terms of the partnership and the response to this being led through health and social care because of it being a health emergency and an illness, Rod Edgar, who's the comms manager at the NHS, is the lead under the Silver Command, but we recognise we've got probably much more resources around this. So part of the establishment of the control centre out at the bridge will be to provide for media and comms support, and I've asked Mark Malloy will lead that in terms of reporting into me and supporting all the different moving parts of this. So we're looking to, from some of the staff that are being displaced, to staff that up. We'll be working 7 days a week, we'll be working 16 hours a day, and we'll have a shift system in place for a resilient team that can cope with what's likely to be 30 to 40% absence at the peak of this as well. So we're moving staff just now, but we can rest assured that members are one of our core groups to make sure you're well informed and kept informed as things move on a daily basis.
I'm pleased to hear that there'll be a shift system, because I think everybody has to bear in mind that if people become exhausted, their immune systems will become compromised, and therefore people have to try and keep themselves safe. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Leader. I want to return to support for business. So clearly we've got Business Gateway, and we also have the South of Scotland Agency starting on the 1st of April. Clearly that's recruiting staff at the moment, and of course the extent to which you might be able to continue recruiting staff is, I guess, unknown because everything is constantly changing. Certainly what the agency will have is a budget for supporting business and developing business in the region. When you're engaging with them, Steve, I guess that will be one of the topics that we might wish to discuss, because their job will be to develop business, but if we haven't got any left, then it will make their job much more difficult. So looking at the best ways in which that money can be used quickly, I think would probably be very worthwhile, and I know we've already discussed this. I want to go back to the point that's been made. I think a couple of members made it about self-employment and businesses that just don't have premises, that clearly don't have access at this point to the support that's already been announced. Clearly the Chancellor is making further statements on that, we think, this afternoon. Is it sensible perhaps for us to have a look at that at an appropriate meeting of the subcommittee, if on the basis of a gap analysis? Because there may be that there remain gaps that we then have to consider whether we can allocate council resources promptly, or whether we can access agencies, the agency resources, for example, to try and fill the gaps, depending on whether or not there are any, but at least to make sure that we're aware of them and can act if need be. It would strike me that given what we're being told about businesses having to make decisions right now about continuing to have staff, that probably would be a fairly urgent item and would fit within the remit of the decision that we've just made.
Yeah, thank you. That's certainly one of the issues that we are engaging with our partners around. There will be gaps, as you say, but this is a situation that changes almost by the hour, never mind by the day. And there was an announcement about wage support that came out yesterday, but there's at the moment very little detail around that, whether that will extend and cover self-employment, for example. That's a possibility. But we'll certainly keep an eye on that detail and start to plot out where we see and perceive that there are gaps in the government package. And that's really been the purpose of our current engagement with the new agency is I think there's a recognition that their initial priority is going to have to be to work with us to plug those gaps. And we will continue to put every pressure that we can on both them and Scottish Government to ensure that that can happen.
Thanks. And Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I'm delighted to hear Gavin speak of that. What we've really got to do in the first instance, that is to feed the people. And we're going to see an increased number of people who are going to require this for whatever reason, whether they're laid off or they just don't have the resources to do that. But I think crucial to that is the contract or whatever it is, the contribution that we make to Fair Share. We need to get that sorted out. I've already had a discussion this week with Derek, and one of the Coronation Day Centre, it was in Stranraer, that has shut down. But what it said was that we will deliver to our members, but we need to keep the food going in these premises, and Fair Share is a means. There's others. We've got the Fed Up Cafe, we've got Kitchen in Wigton, through to Kate's Kitchen in Annan, but they need food to keep it going. And we need to make sure that we can provide that, and Fair Share is a means of doing that. We are going to face people now, an increased number living in poverty, and we've heard of mortgage relief. We've heard this morning to look at council tax relief. We've also got to look at rent. And while we have no direct responsibility on that, it'll be the RSLs. We need to be speaking to the social landlords on so that we don't see people evicted. I would hope that would never happen under the circumstances, but we need to look at that in terms of rent relief as well. social media's playing a huge bit in this, and sometimes it can be panic, it can be anything, and then outrageous. But you know, I'm reading in papers and in social media one local business, local chip shop, who feels he may have to close if it keeps going, but not open again. And that's a long-standing business in Stranraer, and it must be happening the length and breadth of Dumfries and Galloway. So if we are going to offer relief, any kind of business relief or whatever it is, we need to get the communication out there. And I heard Jane talking about a communication strategy. We've got to be using the local media, the radio, the local papers, every what is at our disposal, that we've got to get the message out to these businesses that there is support, there is relief there. But we're not doing it, only today, coming up in the car, I listen to the radio and to, I think it's the clinical advisor. And that was the best piece of information I'd heard in a long time, that the clinical advisor had actually gone on to West Sound to get the message out. We've got to be doing the same, so that we are getting the message to the people, to the communities. This is what's happening, and that to be comprehensive, so that they know as much as what we know, and they're able to respond, rather than get into and they're falling into a deep depression in terms of their businesses, and they will not recover if we don't get that relief out to them as soon as possible and the information to them even quicker.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie, and you're absolutely right. Having a relative soon to be who's I've just been informed has been laid off. I think I'm going to have another lodger for 12 to 18 weeks. But absolutely, and one of the reasons that we brought Mark Malloy, as members all know, he will get this done. And by the end of today, we will be out there telling people, hang on, by Monday, the government, the Scottish Government's investment will start to flow through. And I think we'll get messages out today. There is stuff we can do today. Steve's working on it with Mark. That will go out today, obviously in liaison, to make sure group leaders are absolutely focused on this that we're putting out. But we will get out today to say, by Monday we should be in a position. And COSLA, I know that Councillor McGregor are working flat out to try and coordinate this. But actually, we just need people to hold on, if they can, to next week, so that the considerable money coming through and intervene. So, and again, just going out there saying to people, and something that Lorna was discussing with me, just an email address, just let us know you're there. One of the problems, I think, as Councillor Johnson said, most of our businesses are invisible. And it's so basically out there, we don't have a mechanism to know who they all are. I think the only people that might is the taxman. So again, I think we need to work on that today, get stuff out, so that members are able to start taking decisions very early next week to get money out and into our system from whatever means. But the food one, absolutely, that will be my absolute top priority. And for us all to make sure, again, as the members say, no one is going to go hungry for what is a short-term economic hit we're going to take. So I think, again, we'll be able to have that real dialogue with the subgroup and extend communication to all members on what we're actually doing to make that difference.
Okay, I'm now going to ask Heather if you can fill us in on the work you've been doing about supporting, and it followed on pretty well actually in terms of the support for vulnerable people. Yeah.
You'll appreciate that for social work and social care, this is, to say it's busy is the understatement of the year, really. I think we're bringing new meaning to the word busy, and certainly new meaning to the word pressure. I think what's really clear is that for us, this is a huge professional challenge, because this is about how do we make sure those who are most vulnerable actually get through this situation and are protected and looked after as best as we possibly can. But I think one of the things we're absolutely clear about, and it's already been alluded to, is there will have to be significant changes in how we deliver social care in particular. And that's not just changes in terms of who we deliver to or what we deliver, it's a change in the threshold of what we're delivering in terms of that sort of almost starting point about what we're going to be able to give. And that's about the pressure around the loss of staff, the fact we're working in a stretched system anyway, So as staff go out of this system, we need to find ways of bringing staff in. However, they won't be qualified, experienced. They'll have some training, but not the training you expect. So, you know, in order to sort of use up sort of the different sort of staff we'll get in, we will look to do something that allows us to buddy people up in some way with experienced staff. But again, there'll be a limit to that, given how quickly things are changing. So we're also looking at ways in which we can actually adjust what's on offer. There will clearly be stuff around for sort of for older people in particular. It's about we need to make sure it's quite simple stuff around. We need to make sure they're able to get up in the morning, get dressed, get something to eat, have enough food and fluid during the day, are able to meet their medication needs, any toilet and their personal hygiene needs they've got, and they're able to get to bed at night for those who need that level of assistance. However, our social care staff right across the sector, not just our own in-house staff, won't be able to deliver all of that. So we're looking currently at, and we're just refining and finalising the detail of how much we're actually going to be saying will be delivered by social care staff and how much we'll be looking to others to deliver. Now, it's really welcome, the sort of the support that's coming through from the community, and we absolutely will be tapping into that. One of the things that you know that we currently do on the whole is we would prepare meals, we would maybe have meals delivered. We're going to be looking to other people to say, actually, we will do the care, we'll do the basic stuff to make sure that people are safe in their homes, they're comfortable, and they're as well looked after as we can manage. But we will need other people probably to come in, certainly on the sort of making sure that people are well fed. The fluid stuff, we need to absolutely make sure that people have got enough fluid there for them. We'll do all of that as we go in the morning. We'll make sure people have got access to snacks. But in terms of providing a hot meal, which is what we think is absolutely essential at least once a day, we're looking at ways in which we can talk to some of our current partners to say, can you expand how you might do this? We'll push that as far as we can. We'll also look at whether or not we can use some of the additional staff we hopefully will be able to access to say to those organisations, actually, here's some staff who can help you with this. And then the next stage of that will be, if once we've exhausted that, because we will be to say, actually, as a council, what can we do? What facilities do we now have that may be vacant that we can use that would look at sort of meal preparation and therefore meal delivery, etc. So that's where we're heading. You know, real changes which will need to be communicated out, hopefully early in the week, so that we can actually get out and we can do this. We absolutely appreciate that people will be anxious about this, be really worried about what will happen around their care. We have had some people who have actually decided not to allow the carers into their homes because they're concerned about transmission. And I think that's a very wise decision on one level. However, that will pose a different sort of risk for us in terms of being able to sustain those people through sort of the next period. So we're going to be dealing with a different level of risk than we normally do. And I suppose we live and breathe risk. That's what social work does all of the time. This will take us to a completely new level about how we do it. And therefore, this doesn't sit comfortably professionally for any of us, as it will. We don't expect it to sit with you very comfortably. But this will require us to actually think really differently about how we approach the risk. We absolutely need to make sure we are aware of that risk, but the meeting of that risk and trying to mitigate and manage that risk will have to be done differently. We will try our utmost to make sure that nobody is left at risk. I mean, that is the key, that whatever we're doing, we do it within the basis of risk assessment. I mean, we do that as we go. That's part of our being, that's part of how we work. We don't need a form to write that down. We can just go in and look at something and we know exactly what the risks are and we will respond to them on that basis. So that's a huge area of work around our care at home. The work we've got now around care homes is actually really concerning for us. I think the bit we're most worried about is when we get an infection, which we've no doubt we will do. In fact, we've got some potentials at the minute. Within a care home, that will have really serious consequences. So we're working really closely with our health staff around how we can ensure safe processes in order to keep everybody else, because it's not just the person in the care home who may have got the infection, it will be all of the other residents. And there'll be all sorts of decisions we need to make and risks we need to weigh up about whether or not it's right to pull somebody out of that care home or whether it's better to nurse them where they are. And there are pros and cons all the way around. So none of these will be easy decisions for anybody. The other bit we're trying to manage as best we can in terms of care homes is you'll be aware that all of the care homes now have said that they're closed to visitors. That obviously is a real concern. We're talking about frail older people who rely on that contact with their family. So again, we've been talking to the care homes about how important it is that that's not a complete blanket, and that we find ways where we can to safely allow some family in. Now that will be in exceptional circumstances, and that certainly would be when somebody's at the end of their life. We absolutely would want to support people to be able to go and visit their relatives at that point. Equally, if somebody was exceptionally distressed by what's going on, we would want to be able to bring their relatives in to help sort of calm them down and help their anxiety. But we can only do that if our health colleagues in health protection are able to ensure and be able to put those protective measures around both staff and families to ensure that we minimise any risk of infection within that environment. So you can appreciate the challenges of that. That will not be easy. That will be on a case-by-case basis, as most of what we're doing at the minute is we're having to look at stuff and say, how do we do that on a case-by-case basis? And we're trying desperately to avoid blanket approaches to anything, because we know that won't work for us. So what we're going with is, this is what we're trying to achieve, so that those are the parameters, but actually those parameters might have to flex depending on what it is that we're dealing with, and that will put enormous pressure on the whole system. In order to do some of that, we're really closely, before I go off care homes, one other thing. We've talked, certainly in Social Work Committee, quite a lot about the guidance around the 30-mile radius in terms of placement. That is being suspended. We cannot guarantee that. One of the really important things that we do in terms of supporting our health colleagues is to get people out of the hospital. You know, whilst this infection is running around, if you don't have it, you should not be in the hospital if you can avoid it at all. And therefore, for those people sitting in the hospital currently waiting for discharge into a care home, we're actively working that by early next week, I'm hoping most people will be on their way, but they will not be on their way to their home of choice. I think we have no doubt about that at all. They could well be a number of miles away from family. That's reduced somewhat by the fact that actually the visiting has changed to what it would normally be. And we will do that on an interim basis, but how long that interim basis is, we don't know at this stage. It would certainly be beyond this period. So again, that doesn't sit happily with any of us at all, because we want to give people as much choice and control as we can, but those choices will have to be reduced in order to keep them as safe as possible. Beyond that, when we get to the point whereby actually we've got everybody into the care homes, we've got our care homes are full to capacity, so they're not far off at the minute, then we will be looking at what would be the other solutions. And that's currently under discussion around what else could we do, where else could we put people if they're not able to stay at home for whatever reason. We need to find safe means to do that, and that may well be that we look then to some of our commercial partners around the provision of whether that's hotel rooms or whatever, we don't know. But we're certainly, that's our thinking about trying to think ahead of this, to keep as far ahead as we can, although that is very difficult. As Steve says, you know, this changes not every day, this changes every hour, and sometimes less than that. So we're really just trying to sort of at least have a view of what could happen and what might be some of the potential solutions, and then looking to sort of how we might do that. I certainly would reinforce the bit about partnership working at the minute. I have to say that to say we're working in partnership and doing that very well, again, is a bit of an understatement. This is partnership working at its best, really. And we're right through the centre of that as a social work service. Alongside the resilience control and command that Gavin has spoken about, there's also a control and command process within health itself, which goes up through the bronze, silver, gold. So we're at that silver table where those decisions are being made about management of things within the hospital, within the community, all of the stuff that affects our staff working within health and social care. And that's been really positive about being able then to look at how we would share resources, how we would move things on. And we'll obviously continue to do that. I suppose our other issue in terms of, in addition to service delivery, is about our workforce and the impact on our workforce. So we're already beginning to think, because we can't send all our staff home to work. We have a service to run, and we need to keep that service running. And I think as a senior management team, we're really, really aware of that. So we're in the office all of the time, because it's really important our staff see that we're visible, and that, you know, we're not working at home, we're there, We're not asking them to do things that we wouldn't do ourselves. So that's really important, but that, that also has its pressures when you're trying to keep everything else running as well. What we're trying to go to is what we would normally work to over a Christmas period would be what we call a public protection period. And we're going to step down into that. And during those periods, we would focus on our two focuses at the minute will be anything to do with public protection, which is about protecting children, adults, and all the stuff around justice, because none of that will go away. And in fact, we would anticipate, certainly in terms of some of the child protection and the adult support and protection, that could well increase. We're concerned that there might well be increases around domestic abuse, etc. Families will be under enormous pressure, much more than they normally are. So we're really clear that that core end of our business has to continue as is, although we will make some adjustments supported by Scottish Government changes to legislation in order to be able to manage that as streamlined as possible in order to be able to just get on and do what we need to do. And the other end of the business is obviously what I've just talked about, which is the COVID-19 response. But for our adult care services, most of which are managed within the partnership, although not all, that's basically everything they do. So again, there's very little we can stand down from adult care to say to them, well, it's okay, you don't need to do that, we've been at the minute. There's some tinkering at the edges of some of the stuff, maybe around some of our OT stuff, our sensory support, but not a lot. And so we're still, it's still business as usual in that sense, except it's ramped up into this is an emergency response now, and therefore we're really focused on purely essential work. Now, in order to support our workforce through that, you can understand that that's actually going to be quite difficult because they obviously are quite anxious. Their families themselves are anxious about their own health and anxious about their family's health. And obviously now, in terms of children being off school, that would just add us another pressure, although we're hoping that the arrangements that will be in place will be available to staff as well. So that will ease that one somewhat. The bit we're trying to manage is how do we go to probably something like some sort of shift process or a change in working patterns. That means we've got enough people in our buildings when we need them in, but we've got other people working at home. And then we shift it round maybe half a week or something that makes it work for us really, because we cannot go to a position of having nobody around. And we also have to manage that against sort of the increase in number of staff, not just from our own service, but across the whole social care sector who are already self-isolating and the impact that that is going to have, particularly on the frontline delivery of social care. And that is a real concern. However, we're really pleased that after quite a lot of discussion this week, we have got a decision that in terms of the testing of our staff, the testing which originally was for health staff is now being extended across the whole of the partnership. So if we've got staff in self-isolation, they will be tested and their family members will be tested in order for us to get those staff who do not have the virus back to work as quickly as possible. So for us to lose somebody for 14 days, that's a huge blow. And therefore, there will be people obviously who'll have to stay off, but we're hoping to at least reduce that down through that sort of supportive use of testing. Although that might take a few weeks to get running in terms of capacity for health to do that. But that is the intention and that will make a huge difference. And the other, I suppose, quick thing probably would be just that I know that Lillian, as Chief Social Work Officer yesterday, was at the Scottish Government where there were lots of discussions around what will change and flex within the legislation, within the guidance and the policy that would allow us to do things differently. And we're just firming up what the details of that are. I suppose what that will bring with it will bring more responsibilities back to the Chief Social Work Officer. So again, at a time when we're managing everything that's going on locally, we're also going to be picking up things that other agencies won't do. And that will include things like children's hearings, whereby the hearing system will only meet when it's absolutely essential and there's no other option. So those decisions about children not at that level will come back and will sit with the Chief Social Work Officer. So we're just sort of working out how that will all work. So I think that's a reasonable canter through what we're doing. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Stitt.
Heather, just a wee question about day centres. I heard Wally saying that the Coronation Day Centre at Stranraer was shut. Is all the rest in the Police and Galway shut? Because I came by Dalbeattie Day Centre this morning and there was no notice up in the window saying it was shut or nothing. And also, I think when your care homes are taking up the mantle, because my daughter-in-law works in one, they've actually tried to get the residents into room isolation, which has proven a nightmare because they're getting out and also the staff are putting in air beds and camp beds in case the staff have got to stay on site?
There's two issues there I'm happy to answer. In terms of daycare, yes, during the week, we've seen an increase in the closures of daycare. And to be fair, that's about, again, not having people congregated in one place and about how you then manage the risk of infection. So, that's really sensible that they have shut those day services. However, that then adds further pressure within the social care system, because we then need to then go in and look and say how many of those people will need to be supported at home because they don't have access to their day service. But we absolutely support our colleagues in the independent sector in doing that, because we can't see that they would have any option to do it. In terms of care homes, that is really difficult because, again, we're dealing with people here, some of whom will have dementia, who won't understand what's going on. And again, the real difficulty here is we will never get to a position, whether it's a care home or anywhere else, whereby our staff can have hands-off. It's hands-on care, whichever way round we look at it. So again, we're looking at how we as a council and as a partnership can support our care home providers and our care at home providers, and we're already beginning to identify that might mean us putting some additional staff in there as well. And so we're working that through. I mean, at the minute, it's the normal rules won't apply, and it will be whatever needs done, we will do, and it will be everybody will have their sleeves rolled up, and we'll all be pitching in with whatever is required to do. And whether that will eventually, I think, eventually being probably a couple of weeks, mean that, say, for example, some of our frontline social work staff, including managers, may well be off to a care home to do a shift for them because actually they're really struggling. And we're fully anticipating that actually we may be putting our own staff in to deliver care or to run a shift in a care home, because we can't, this is about, we all just need to come together to support our colleagues, really. Because if one of the care homes goes down in the midst of this, that just creates another issue. So it's about trying to make sure that we don't let any of the dominoes fall.
Councillor McKee.
Hi, thanks, Chair. You answered a lot of my issue, well, to a certain extent, a lot of my issues. It's regarding this testing. You never hear about it, and where can he go to get tested? But how long does a test last for? Is it a one-off each time they go to visit a constituent or a patient? And it's a general question regarding the council. Should we be looking at trying to get our staff all tested for having this virus? And would it be any benefit to us?
Okay, I can answer the testing one a bit. Really, there's a bit of it I'm not sure about. I doubt you'll get all staff tested simply because of the availability of the tests and the time it takes to turn them round. In terms of the testing of staff who are involved in frontline care, that will be done through the NHS, and they're just finalising for us the process by which that would be done and how they would do that, where that would be done, etc. In terms of how long that lasts, we don't know enough about this virus probably to know. I think that what we're going on really is that when somebody's been in contact with someone where it would appear there might be an issue, where they've been told to self-isolate by a doctor because they've got some sort of cough or a fever, then we're going to test. That's the criteria at the minute. It's no more sophisticated than that. And that's what's been agreed. We can't do anything more than that. We're assuming that will keep them okay until maybe the next time they're in touch with somebody who maybe has the virus, and we might have to test again. But that one we haven't got to that bit yet, really. So a lot of unknowns still, and it's no guarantee. The testing itself will be no guarantee at this stage that everything's okay, because you could then just go in the following day to someone where there is an issue and you're back in the same position.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Thanks, Heather. You covered most of the points I was going to bring up anyway, about, protecting people. We've got an army of volunteers, that want to put themselves forward to help out, to deliver the council services. I'm just wondering about the do's and don'ts, or the guidance, that will be available. Will it be available on the council website? Because it's paramount that not only do we protect the volunteers, but we also protect the people that they're looking after, if they're delivering a service for the council.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think whilst it's really good that we've got such a good response, there is an onus on us to make sure that's as safe a response as possible. And again, we won't be able to do the same level of checks that you would expect to do in normal times, so we will have to live with some risk with that. But I think what we would want to look for would be what level of guidance can we put up that actually is simple, straightforward, and can be available to people absolutely through the council website, but we would look then at where else that would need to go. And I would certainly talk to Richard about that one in terms of the community response around how we link that up. And we look at what the sort of the core sort of like do's and don'ts would be, but also advice to people themselves who might be receiving that support about what they might do if they're a bit concerned about anything, and where they need to go to, so that we pick things up really quickly. On the whole, we know that the vast majority of people volunteering, it'll be absolutely sound, but we just need to be conscious of the fact that unfortunately that may not be the case for everybody.
Councillor Crothers?
Thank you. Firstly, I get a lot of confidence from your presentation, Heather, and your answers that you're given. Quick one on day centres. Spoke to Annan Day Centre on Wednesday. On Tuesday, they closed the doors. I think they had somewhere around 13 Meals on Wheels, and short of 60 by Wednesday, and that's grown. So I think they looked at all the day centres should take the same approach. We're paying for that anyways. We should maximise that resource across the region. Hopefully that's the stance that we're taking. Is there an opportunity in regards to information sharing? We've got 2 or 3 small blockages at the end just to finalise that. Is this an opportunity we just get rid of that? And we've got the full information sharing underway. And what kind of conversation you having around key workers? Is that a pressure or not? Key worker status, I suppose. So we'll make sure that people are getting any resource what they need, whether it's childcare or not.
Okay, in terms of key worker status, that's been subject to discussion around whether social work has been included or not, but I understand following the conversations yesterday that we will be included. And our argument would be that has to be right across the service, including children and families and justice services, because again, you know, the interlinking at the minute will be so close that if you lost one part of the service, then actually you're just going to be turned into the rest of it, really. So we need to keep the whole of the service linked in. They need to have access into whatever's available for them as parents in terms of their children, but equally then we would have the same argument in terms of the testing around making sure they're okay, and that would extend as well to making sure that in terms of protective equipment, that we will make that available right across the service, but we'd be really clear when it's appropriate to use that. You know, that we don't need to use that for every visit, but we need to be clear about that and how that will work, and we need to be clear about the sourcing of that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Driver.
Thanks very much, here. Unprecedented times. Absolutely no doubt about this. When you talk about a battle plan, of course, my ears pick up quite hard. Because you've got to, if you're under contact, you win the firefight, the control the attack, and then you do the recovery, which we're talking about here. My issue, not so much an issue, but potential opportunities for families who may have to go further afield into care homes with regard broadband contact through Skype or something like that. Have you considered that situation? Because obviously mental health is really important to those that are feeling lonely and isolated.
Yeah, that's a really important point, and we've been assured, and it's been finally checked again to make sure that every care home has access to Attend Anywhere, which is the NHS Near Me. So that would at least provide sort of the means by which somebody to do what we, FaceTime, Skype. It's the same sort of thing that would allow families then to be able to interact. So we're really looking at making sure that we maximise the opportunities for families where they can't get in to see their relative, that they have some opportunity to at least be able to see people. It's not the same, but it's better than a phone call, and obviously there'll be a lot of phone calls. But yes, NHS IT services are working really hard to ensure that all of that's there, the connectivity's there as well, and that people know how to work it. Because that's the other bit, because it's one thing saying it's there, but we need to be assured that people in the care home are feeling comfortable to work it. But alongside that, in terms of one of the things we're looking to do around supporting the reduction in what we're delivering face-to-face care at home, would be to put in some sort of telephone/online service there, which would again mean sort of some of the additional staff we would hope to get to support us, whereas we'll actually cluster it up and we'll put them and we'll give them a small group of people and say, your job now is over the next number of weeks to ring that person about mid-morning, make sure they're okay, ring them about in the afternoon. If we can do it on Skype, then we'll do it. Again, that bit about trying to reduce the impact of the isolation and the loneliness. Really, it's not perfect, but it's at least something that we maybe get in the way, and maybe sort of say to people, be as creative as you want here, you know. And those people who are really IT savvy will be able to do stuff about maybe linking people up as well. So we're going to see how that all sort of comes together, really.
Can I come back in here and just ask about one other thing? I mean, I don't know if it's fortunate, maybe that.
Yeah, when Richard explains the structure, and I think you'll see how we'll be able to bring recommendations back to members about where investment can be made in a priority hierarchy. So certainly Richard will explain the themes and groups that fit into that for you.
I'm going to take Councillor Ferguson and then Councillor McClelland, and then I think we'll move on to Gillian, because people are beginning to sort of move away, and obviously the arrangements for schools, I think, will be of interest to everybody. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Leader. Just a couple of things first, and then a question. Just for members' interest and information, that the IGB, we've taken the decision to stand in all committees, subcommittees, and only convene if there's an absolute necessity, and that will be done through a digital platform as well. So that's purely for information. The other is a comment that's been made by senior officers in health to me, is that the old ways of working will never come back, because as this crisis is developing, we're actually seeing that we need to change dramatically how we do things. And I think that's been reflected in almost every update we've had from officers. Now, my question for Heather, and thank you for your presentation, Heather, is that we've a whole raft of people now who are deemed vulnerable, who never in their wildest dreams thought they were vulnerable. So have we got a triage system put in place? Because we know those most vulnerable right at this moment in time, the traditionally most vulnerable. So how the new people come onto the conveyor belt, for lack of better words, is really important for us. So how do we work out very quickly whereabout on the conveyor belt they get put on? It's like Tesco trolley, isn't it?
Okay, in terms of we absolutely expect there to be an increase in vulnerable people, and we've linked into the primary care bronze command through the NHS, and our discussions there with GPs has been about, you will see people coming through who are currently not vulnerable or don't feel they've ever been vulnerable, but who will become so over the next few weeks, and that might be because of their own health, but it might also be because of their caring, so that their current carers, where maybe they don't get any support, but if their carers get ill, then suddenly we've got a whole other cohort of people who need to be supported. So we've alerted them, and we're thinking about how best that can come through. But the other one that we're doing as well is we're looking to increase the resources we're putting into what's called our access team, which is our front door basically. So that's where all the calls come through for triage about what needs to happen. We're also increasing our resources into our MASH, and we're talking social work resources here around qualified experienced people, into our MASH, which is our multi-agency safeguarding hub. And we'll do the same with our out-of-hours service, so that our front door services are as robust as they possibly can be. And then we will be dealing and using our normal processes, because that's tried and tested. That's social work assessment, quick crisis intervention type stuff. That will stand through this period. But it's about making sure that we have the resources to deal with any of that sort of increase in flux. So that is in hand, and will be taken forward next week.
And Councillor McClelland.
Thank you very much, Leader. Heather, I think it's well recognised that the service providers and our care companies, they tend to focus more on the larger towns and dwellings, and when we get to the remote locations, we find the care companies are not as quick to pick these up, and that probably poses a significant challenge going forward. How are we going to ensure that our constituents, the public in the remote locations, are going to have the service maintained, and the financial challenges that this is probably going to pose, how are these going to be dealt with going forward?
Okay, that's a current challenge, as we know, in terms of people who are rural and remote. Most of those ones are picked up by our in-house service, CAS, and that's absolutely a real concern for us. So first and foremost, we would want to guarantee that people are safe and there aren't any further risk. However, in terms of what we deliver, that will have to change. So, for example, we may at the minute be putting in 2-3 visits a day to somebody who's quite remote. We might have to rethink that and say, well, actually, as long as we can get in once a day or twice a day, but we augment what goes in, we link it maybe to some sort of other sort of contact that means that we're in contact with people during the day, because actually we're just not going to have the capacity for those sort of trained and qualified staff to go out more than maybe twice a day. I mean, we're going with hopefully twice a day as our sort of our minimum, really. But it will mean that we'll have to seriously rethink. However, having said that, there will always be those people, not necessarily just in remote and rural, who actually have quite substantial care packages where we absolutely will not be changing it, because actually to do so would leave them at too much risk. So I can give you that assurance, absolutely. We will be looking sort of the majority of stuff where we can tweak, we can shift it a bit. There'll be another group whereby we'll have to do things really differently, and there'll be another group, we hope a small group, whereby actually we need to leave the arrangements as are, because actually the risk would be far, far too great.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Heather. Gillian?
Forgive me for being on my phones. I think it seems to be constant communication at the moment, but I know we're all busy. The schools, as you know, from the First Minister and Deputy First Minister's announcements, the schools will close to the majority of pupils. And at the moment, the work over the last 2 days has been defining the majority. We have been given 3 priorities for schooling over the coming days and weeks, and that is to ensure all pupils meet the requirements of the SQA in the senior phase. So it's basically getting kids through their exams, making sure they meet their expectations for their next steps in learning, to protect our more vulnerable pupils. So that would be our pupils either with additional support needs, care plans, or looked after children, young carers, for example. And thirdly, the Category 1 and the children of Category 1, 2 and 3 workers in that order. So there is a great deal of work to do, and we're communicating with parents to try and summarise all of that today. We have done a lot of work with Julie White and our colleagues within Health and Social Care, and at the moment we have 1,660 children who will be looking for childcare as from next week, because they are Category 1 and Category 2 responders with one parent. So we know the scale of the issue. Our planning was based on around about a 10% modelling, so we weren't too far off. So we've got 1,600 kids who come into that childcare bracket. Some of those will be in the early years. Those will be managed through the PVI sector. Deputy First Minister made that quite clear, that the PVI sector have been absolutely fantastic in Dumfries and Galloway. We work very closely with them, and they have been amazing, was the definition given to us by our early years team. They have absolutely risen to the challenge, and they will be working with the flexibility given to them by the Care Inspectorate in terms of providing the response for early learning and childcare, and also up to age 12, if that's the parent's choice, to support the needs of the Category 1, Category 2 responders. We then have around 400 children who will be our priority, who would fit probably within the vulnerable group. We don't want to use that terminology. I'm using it as shorthand today, but you probably will not see that in the letters going out to parents. We need to get a different phrase. But the children we feel that school is a protective factor and that we want to maintain good continuity. So there are around 400 children in that category at the moment. So I've just written to Julie to say that the childcare arrangements will be up and running by Thursday, probably a couple of days later than we would all have liked. If we can bring it forward, we will, but I can guarantee that there will be childcare arrangements for those Category 1 and 2 responders by Thursday. It gives us some thinking time, some planning time. All of our school buildings will be open on Monday, and we will be bringing together in some senior phase pupils to complete their SQA work. There's been a little bit of interpretation. You may have seen that on social media. There's been some interpretation about what we meant by cohort. So some schools have opened to all senior phase pupils, some have not. that has pleased and displeased people in equal measure. So people are quite keen to get their kids in to finish their coursework. Other people are very keen that they're not going in to complete their coursework. So we are working with a number of differing expectations. On the one hand, we have the science and we have the reality. So parents are not wanting full cohorts of children coming together because we're trying to limit the gathering of young people. But clearly, parents also want children to come together to finish work and also to be looked after while they have to go out to work to keep their businesses running and to provide care. So at the moment, I think the schools are absolutely up for the part that they will play in this, but there are tensions which we are having to manage, tensions in the message, that you have to work from home, that you have not to gather, that you have to protect certain groups, and yet the schools are clearly going to be delivering services within community hubs. Now, we will manage that. We have good deep cleans arrangements, we have kitchen facilities, we have our community hub arrangements, we have active schools, and we have a wide range of activities which will take place in a safe and secure environment for parents who wish or need this activity. Running parallel to that, we will have digital learning, supported learning, and a wide range of educational activities which are delivered remotely for pupils. So our teaching workforce is fully committed to do that, and our schools have already put out calls for young people who don't have digital devices. So if you don't have a digital device, how can we help you? If you want to work via Glow, as you will be expected to work via Glow, how can we within the school help you to do that in a safe and isolating environment? So these are the practicalities that we're working through at the moment. I'm sure there's a lot more, but I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks. I just wondered if you could expand slightly on two factors. First of all, is there going to be any, or what is the sort of plans that are being put into place for possible redeployment of school staff, including teachers and non-teaching, given that obviously there's been a commitment from teachers to first of all to look after and provide some sort of education to particularly senior phase and to those of vital workers. But actually, is there any plans in place? Secondly, is about transitions and what early planning or what planning you expect to do over the next couple of months about that transition for particularly preschool into P1 and P7 into S1.
In the first instance, we are looking about deploying our staff within our own service. So at the moment, we're looking at, as I said, about 10% of pupils in a school environment, but we are expecting all schools to be all children to be learning. Now, we will see how that works out in practice in terms of a school day, but our teachers are expected to manage the learning experiences of pupils, but to do it remotely. So we are expecting, and we have a form of words and a letter to all staff, along with my colleagues across Scotland, as to what the teaching workforce are expected to do. And we have a wide range of creative solutions for how that learning will be delivered. So the teaching staff in the first instance will be focused on providing that learning pack up until the Easter holidays. And then we have we have a workforce who are prepared to work over Easter to provide educational activities, because we're aware that the response will be beginning to ramp up over the period of the Easter holidays. So I do not foresee that schools will be closed in the Easter holidays, because they will still be preparing those contingency responses. Your second question, Councillor Wilson?
Transitions, particularly
yes.
preschool to P1
Yes.
and
So we have a plan A and a plan B. Normally transition is the week of the 25th of June. So that is our planned week. In reality, that may not be practicable, and so we are then looking at having a transition period as we move back into or towards August. At this point in time, we are working towards the 25th of June, but I think we have to be realistic as to what that will look like in practice.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Leader. Gillian, are food production workers regarded as a key category?
Thank you. It's defined as any worker where the infrastructure is required to support the Category 1 response. So I think we have tried to be very inclusive in our definition of that. We had actually already gone out to our staff before the definitions were published by both the UK and then latterly the Scottish Government. So we have said anyone within health and social care, social work, or who considers themselves a key worker with regards to the response. We certainly do not want to get into the you are and you are not dilemma. If people need help from our services, I would wish to provide that.
However, this is a this is a war we're in, and we're already 20% teachers down, and we haven't started. So we but absolutely, it'll be a case by case basis. We can't generalise around it, and I'd imagine as we move through to keep some small businesses going, we'll need to offer out to there. Again, that's why it's a daily, hourly move, but it's not blanket, but we will look at everybody, because a key worker could depend. If your business is going to go bust, if you can't be 24/7 trying to do business, then we'll have to consider you a key worker. But I think the problem that Glasgow said, anybody wants education can get it, and then the chief executive spoke to me this morning and suddenly realised she doesn't even have enough staff to do what she's starting with next week. So I think for me it is about that rural. That's why when Gillian and I started this conversation, we're very keen all schools are staying open so we can contract in. Moving out would be almost impossible. So again, a case-by-case basis, if employers come to us and say we desperately need, particularly the self-employed, looking at the point that others have made, we will be looking very generously towards that, but within available resources. And after the Easter holidays, we may need to reconsider. But we will do that in consultation with members.
Councillor Hislop.
Just within the likes of the key worker groups, are we looking to sort of say, right, if you're NHS, you're going to Dumfries High School, if you're care worker, you're going to St Joe's, because if you get an outbreak in the hospital, and then the children, because it could be, I think is it 14 days that you're meant to separate, somebody could be actually getting that COVID-19 in their system for 14 days, they're sharing it across their children who then go to school who share it with the care workers. Is there anything that we're doing to sort of make sure that that's sort of being looked into? Another thing is, how will children from remote areas who are key workers and possibly staff as well, who don't have the availability of cars, get into the schools?
In terms of the first point, it's not something that we've looked at in terms of the cohorting of those children who are at risk of any particular point. We have not done that. We've done the children who are currently enrolled in the school. They will be the target audience for that school unless the parent chooses a wraparound provision, which could be available through the PPI sector. Certainly, with, as Heather highlighted, the increase in testing, we should get a clearer idea, and that might give us more science to base that on. But I would be expecting, given that the purpose of the closure is to limit containment, that when children are in school, they are not in large groups. This has to be activity which manages that containment priority too. The transport issue is a vexing one because it is by its nature, their workforce is reducing as well. So we had 3 routes yesterday which were down. We've another 2 routes today which were down, and that is being managed at a local level. I have 86 highly professional and committed head teachers and a workforce of nearly 3,000 who want these children to be looked after and educated. And this morning a head teacher just said, I'm getting the minibus, I'm going to go and get them. And I would imagine that if we try to create one solution which works for everyone, we will be found wanting. We have to harness the power and the creativity and the commitment of people in our resilient communities. And things that people have said already this morning. If children are needing education and childcare and transport or food are part of that, I'm confident our partners can meet these local solutions.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones, John. The 660 childcare places you're looking at, in the media there's some talk about children at risk, but not in the system. but does that take care of that situation? So they've not got a social worker, they've not got somebody there, but they are at risk of maybe perhaps physical, dangers. The other one is the senior phase stuff. I'm interested in that. Does that conflict with the national guidance in any kind of way? I know that individual authorities have the power to do what they want within the schools and that, but does it kind of conflict with anything that's going on there? The other one is the teacher situation. Is there systems in place? I had somebody speaking to me regarding who is a teacher is wanting to move to another school as long as they take the child with them, their own child with them. Is that a possibility? Because they've not had any feedback from that. And just in a kind of a long-term situation, we've got, and you highlighted yourself, things are very difficult, and it's long-term change, and it's long-term change for teachers, for pupils, and families. And obviously, they will have psychological implications within that for how schools work. If it lasts for 6 months or it lasts for a long period of time, because people's views of the education, the kids' views of their education will change. Is there any kind of plans for that as well?
If I could take the first and last of your questions, because I think they're closely linked. First of all, in terms of vulnerable children, we have identified close to 400 children who social work, health and our supporting learners team feel in the first instance are our priority, and that is for a range of reasons. But we will, working with children and families and working with our colleagues in the NHS, we will continue to keep that under review. Now, that won't necessarily mean that these children will be coming into school, but they certainly will have. We have a raft of principal teachers, pupil support, we have our educational visitors, we have a wide range of staff who will now be working in different ways, and they will prioritise the needs of those children. For some, it will be learning packages at a place of learning. For others, it will be done in a different way, but that will be bespoke to the individuals. In terms of preparing our service for recovery, my team, we've set ourselves into 6 work streams. We set that up a week ago so that we have got into the battle rhythm that was already mentioned, and 6 of those is the recovery phase. That is the work stream that I'm leading, because it's very important that we carry on with the work that we need to do. So come August, September or June or wherever we are at, that our schools, our systems, our staff, our pupils are able to respond. Because as I've heard regularly from public health nationally and locally, we will get through this, but it will look and feel different, and we have to be ready that our systems, and that is not just the school system, but the 16 to 24 system too, has to be ready to respond to this. We have young people in the senior phase who are making big decisions for their life beyond school, and that matters to our economy too. So our colleges, our UCAS, our further education and higher education have to adapt to children who will be coming out of school with a different pattern of qualifications potentially. So we need to make sure that the needs of our economy is supported by the skills of our young people now and the qualifications that they will receive, so no child is disadvantaged from that.
Councillor Little.
Thank you, Leader. Well, mine's is not really a question, but kind of a reassuring update. There'll be a lot of young people who are going to school today that are doing subjects, senior students are doing subjects that they can't finish off at home, that require recordings, recitals, compositions, portfolios and such like. And my question was going to be a little while ago that is all the information you're giving us here, Gillian, being given to the schools in time to give to the students? But as I'm sitting here, I've been getting emails and messages from all the schools that my senior phase advanced higher daughter is doing, and telling them exactly that information, telling the parents, so it's actually going through. So it'll be a great relief to the young people that are in today that know that it's not final if there's certain stuff they can't do at home. So I'm really pleased to see that that's all joined up.
Thank you, and I've remembered I didn't respond directly to one of Councillor Nicholson's questions, which was specifically about the senior phase. The priority for schools is to complete the senior phase SQA coursework requirements, And some of our schools have interpreted that as, right, everybody come in, S4 to S6, come in on Monday and we'll work out what we need to do. And some have perhaps taken a slightly different approach. Now, that's where the empowerment of head teachers means that they will, and it's right that they will interpret that for local levels, particularly our rural schools. If they can bring everybody in together, they might find that easier in terms of transport. So the schools will take appropriate responses to make sure portfolios and practical work is completed. Now, that may well be on an individual basis or in a small group basis. If a whole cohort is coming together, it will only be for Monday so that we can get a sense of what needs to be done. So the SQA, we have another fortnight to complete the SQA requirements, and I'm confident that they will be flexible in that. But we just, at the moment, we're working from an announcement that was made yesterday afternoon, and we have to think what we need to now do with our pupils and our parents.
Well, thanks very much, Gillian. Thank you. And Richard.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, members. Been various discussion today and recognising, I guess, the unprecedented and challenging times that we are facing. In terms of an emergency planning perspective, we recognise very quickly over the past week to 10 days that the well-developed, the highly successful model that we've got in place in terms of reacting to emergency situations in Dumfries and Galloway was insufficient to respond appropriately to the size and scale of the coronavirus pandemic. And so we've established what I think we're describing as quite unprecedented arrangements across the council, and a framework that has totally changed the operating arrangements of our council in terms of the required skill set, resource, expertise, and everything that we require in terms of responding appropriately and adequately to what is a very, very serious situation. Leader, I'm really confident that at this stage we're really well prepared in terms of the response to date, and we have developed, I think the Chief Executive used the term battle rhythm. We have developed an appropriate battle rhythm tempo to tackle the significant challenge at pace, and we will continue to do so. In terms of picking up on a couple of comments that the Chief Executive made, if I may just give some further reassurance to members, in terms of the arrangements that I will talk you through for our council, they are very much aligned with the multi-agency approach. We are very much working with our key partners, both in terms of the tactical local resilience partnership, the bronze level that the Chief Exec spoke about, where myself and Mark Thompson are involved in that forum, along with other appropriate colleagues. At the strategic local resilience partnership level, the gold level, where Gavin and myself are at the table. And that reports, as the Chief Exec said, straight into Scottish Government. So we're really at the heart of what we're doing in terms of planning and delivery around the emergency response. And in terms of our statutory duties, members, in regard to the Civil Contingencies Act, I'm very confident that as lead strategic officer in this regard, we are absolutely delivering on our statutory requirements in terms of that legislation. So in terms of the authorities' approach, if you like, which I say dovetails and aligns very much with the local tactical resilience partnership, we have established two key themes, two key areas of the business, if you like. The first one being our approach to the emergency situation, and the second one being aligned to business continuity. And resourcing what requires to be the norm in terms of day-to-day provision. The two things are different, but they're not independent, and they're intrinsically linked. And I think we've heard some examples this morning of how the day job absolutely aligns and feeds into some of the emergency situation and the emergency cells, as we're calling them, how they will work and how they've been established. So there are on the left-hand side, on the emergency resilience side, we have 9 cells that have been established across our authority. Each one of those has a senior officer being responsible and reporting in to the COVID-19 response management team, which is led by myself. So in essence, what I'm saying is, in terms of a shift from heads of service and service managers away from the day job and being focused on our critical response to this scenario, that's the level and extent of shift we've applied and resource we've applied to the challenge. We have an information and surveillance cell, which is about managing the significant level of information that we're receiving as a local authority on an hourly basis, daily basis, making sure that information is cascaded and the right people at the right time receive that data. We're managing the internal and external processes in that regard, and we're considering all of the risk management and decision-making logs and processes and audit trail that we clearly require to have in place as we make key and critical decisions as we move forward throughout the emergency situation. The second cell is that of economic recovery, and colleague Steve Rogers has covered a great deal of that this morning, but that very much is one of the key themes that we're taking forward, and we'll continue to make sure that through the response management team, linking with corporate management team and senior leadership team of the council, that things are continued to delivered at pace and with tempo. And I think that I can't stress that critically enough in this emergency scenario. We can't wait for things to happen. We need to take some decisions and make sure that we react appropriately and swiftly. The third cell is that of communications, and again, there's been some discussion, debate on that in the chamber today. That's obviously critical. Communication to our communities, communication to our staff, communication to you as our members, as well as the comms groups that we've established through the multi-agency approaches, etc. A number of things have happened already. We are very much coordinated with the NHS. The director spoke earlier today around how Mark Malloy and colleagues from the NHS are working together on this agenda. That's a really good example, members, of how we've shifted from what would be a normal emergency situation in regard to the tactical local resilience arrangements, because within that scenario, the police would be the lead in terms of communications. This is clearly not appropriate in this set of circumstances and the size and scale and type of challenge that we've got. So that's shifted from the police to an NHS and with council support in terms of comms as the lead organisation. As of next week, members, you will receive daily updates. And you'll receive daily updates both from a corporate and strategic perspective, but also a ward perspective. And I will share with you today some specific COVID-19 key contacts and email addresses, so you will have a direct contact with the overall response management team that will come to myself and the team, as well as key areas of community support. I'll come on to that in a second: economic recovery, education and social work. In terms of some of the things that have happened pretty quickly, and those of you who know colleague Mark Malloy well will know that this will happen quickly and it will happen at pace, is that only yesterday we've got some really positive comms out in terms of local media. I had a message from the Chief Executive. We've established the Support Dumfries and Galloway site with messages to communities of how to help, the dedicated email contact, and the link to the community support cell. We've got some good messages out there around youth work and around lifelong learning, around digital learning and what's happening in that regard, and also information in regard to rate relief, small businesses, pubs, retails, etc., which again has been talked about this morning. So in terms of comms, I'm very confident that we've established a really positive platform that we can move on and take forward very quickly. Third area, workforce. 1, 2, 3, fourth area, fourth cell, workforce. Again, some of this has been touched on this morning. We have a workforce cell now that's taking a lead on providing clarity and support to staff, those impacted and those who are continue to work. Councillor Wilson mentioned home working. Absolutely, we are driving that with our managers as a key area that will allow us to work in a different way and allow us to reduce social contact in the workplace. So that's very much a key theme that's being taken forward by the workforce cell. The other critical area, and again it aligns very much with what we've been talking about this morning, is that we're completing a gap analysis in terms of where we require resource to be redirected now. And we've talked about the critical areas of health and social care, children's services, out of hours, the call centre, care call, and even other areas like waste, where we're already seeing a number of colleagues, a number of staff not in the workplace, and that's a critical area in terms of business continuity. So we'll be working with our workforce cell in terms of not only gap analysis, but also then understanding where we have available resource. We talked this morning about some of the facilities that have already closed, where we will be able to identify through appropriate liaison with staff, with joint trade unions, through the workforce cell, where we can redirect resource to what are critical areas of our business in an appropriate managed way with appropriate training. So that's happening now. With that's already started. Additional deaths, the fifth cell, where we're liaising very closely with the private sector in terms of business continuity planning for the worst case scenario, and with NHS colleagues in terms of that specific area of the business, mortuary provision, etc., etc. Logistics, we've done a lot on logistics over the past week, where we've worked really hard. We've now got a central solutions centre team that's been established to manage all inquiries around how we deal with emergency cleaning materials, PPE, cleaning services. That will all be brigaded under one banner. We've secured some medium-term volume key products that are in short supply. We've managed to get a reasonable supply, and we have a number on order. So colleagues that are leading on this area are very positive in terms of being able to maintain the high levels of standards of hygiene that we've set ourselves thus far. Facilities operations are working with fleet services and transport, which is something I'll come on to talk about in a second in a little bit more detail, to put in place regarding the review of pool cars, cleaning of vehicles as we use them for different elements of the business and we use them more frequently. And facilities operations are also preparing emergency food plans and food packs that, in terms of answering Councillor Dryber's question earlier, are already being distributed by our staff around the region, and we're already engaging through the community hub with key partners of how we can enhance and extend that model. Estate, we're working, obviously, the Director mentioned earlier about fewer buildings, about reducing social contact, about setting up the bridge as our multi-agency coordinating centre. We're engaging with NHS colleagues about which buildings we use and how we can work together to use them more efficiently and more effectively. Transport, we are again sharing resource. We're in dialogue with the NHS about what transportation resource we have and how we can better use it across the multi-agency approach in terms of business continuity planning. We're horizon scanning, if you like, in terms of transportation, because at the moment it's not one of the areas that we're seeing a significant impact in terms of fuel, in terms of access to fuel. But we're on that, we're reviewing it, we're keeping a close eye on it in terms of when we need to order fuel to make sure that we've got that available for our lifeline services. And even then, we're already coming across small bumps in the road. Nationally, MOT testing has been suspended. However, if legislation doesn't then follow suit very quickly, we may well have vehicles that are not roadworthy and are unable to put them on the road. So we're working very closely and escalating that through the Chief Executive links on a national level to make sure that we're all joined up on that one. Critical and key area we've touched on this morning quite a lot is that of community support. And I have to say, I'm delighted and really proud of the work we've done in a really quick time frame over the last sort of 48 hours to really brigade this area of the business and move forward in terms of support to community councils and community groups in terms of their resilience activities, particularly for older and vulnerable people. We're sharing information, we're providing good practice examples for volunteers and community organisations. We're mapping where community-led resilience activity is taking place across the region and arranging for support where gaps are identified. And we're coordinating and providing volunteering opportunities for individuals within third sector organisations and public sector partners and building capacity with volunteers. All of that is aligned with targeting our vulnerable groups in terms of anti-poverty, in terms of food, in terms of homelessness, in terms of our minority groups. We've established, as I mentioned, the community support direct email address. We have a number of contacts, some of which have been provided by yourselves members, which we're incredibly grateful for. We're contacting those people. We're supporting them in terms of providing direct support to these vulnerable groups across the region. So in terms of the community support cell, we're on the case. It's moving at a really quick pace, which it requires to do, and you have my assurance that it will continue to do in that regard with the Chief Executive's support in terms of reallocating resource as and where that is required to make that happen. Can't stress that enough in terms of emergency response. Time and pace is absolutely critical. The other side, if you like, is the business continuity side, where, again, the Chief Exec's described it excellently in terms of our, if you like, contracting briefcase. We're reducing the level of specific resource that's required to keep services ticking over, keep things going in terms of what might be considered a day job, but also highlighting very much where there are issues. I mentioned waste earlier. Clearly waste, burials, infrastructure, critical that those things that require to continue as part of normal business also align and feed into the cells in terms of emergency planning. And again, I can give you assurances that that's happening through the COVID-19 response management group. Finance and procurement, democratic services. Obviously, we've made some critical decisions this morning, which I applaud you for as elected members. They will allow us and my team to react and move much quicker in terms of the emergency response and the size and scale of challenge that we've got. Financial well-being, again, absolutely critical in terms of getting grants out the door, in terms of moving quickly in terms of financial support, in terms of current provision, housing, council tax, non-domestic rates, and applying any revised arrangements in terms of the business rates and new funding streams that become available to us, working very closely with the economic recovery strategy. Members, that's a whistle-stop tour through the 9 cells that we've established in terms of emergency response and our approach to business continuity and what we're doing in that regard. For me, as we sit here and now, Leader, in conclusion, I think the framework we've put in place provides members with the assurances that our council is demonstrating strong leadership in this regard. Despite the elements of complexity, the scale and the severity of the challenge, and I reiterate, a strategic lead for this area, I think we're in a really strong place. I'm very confident that we've got a fit-for-purpose structure with the right people in the right areas leading and directing this critical response to the coronavirus issue.
Thanks very much for that. Put the glasses back on, can't we? Councillor McClelland.
Thank you very much again, Leader. Richard, thank you for that whistle-stop tour there. One of the points I picked up on is that going forward, us as elected members, the role that we can play and the link that we will have in the immediate future with our ward officers. I think that's absolutely critical that we exploit that to the fullest
And I realise there you've made the, under the communications cell, you've given indication that there'll be daily updates, but I wonder if you could maybe expand on that in some way to ensure that all elected members have this link with the ward officer, because I think that will be a real strength going forward, sharing information and getting information out to everyone in both directions.
Through you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor McLennan. Absolutely. I think we're already seeing the benefit of close working relationship that's been established through the Communities Directorate between elected members and ward workers and ward managers. There's been an ongoing communication in terms of identifying resource in the local community, and we've been able to, as a consequence of that, move really quickly. So I will ensure that through both in terms of comms with you as elected members and through the community support cell, that is enhanced and is developed, because I see it as a critical opportunity moving forward.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chairman, I think everyone that's spoken from council officials have spoken of a great deal of effort and work being put in by our staff, which is tremendous and to be, as Richard said, applauded. But in regard to the waste service, then, you know, again, the efforts are being put in there to keep that service going as an essential service. And the staff, the operatives are under strain, constant strain, and they also are suffering, you know, they are subjected to the virus and where it's going to affect it. So I would hope that we would be sensitive to their concerns and everything else, and sometimes that they don't congregate or be left in places where it's not appropriate. I intend to speak to Derek because it was raised with me yesterday. So I think we do need to be sensitive to their needs and families and everything else, and you know, this self-isolation, but yet they're coming out and facing the same as many of the other staff.
Can I answer that one? You know, even though it's been very difficult, I'm going to make sure this man on my right takes some time off this week. It's that level. We've been really fortunate to have the joint trade unions right into the tactical groups to sit in when we're taking these decisions. But also, I think it's right down to the managers that this is a marathon. We can't burn the people out. The other thing I would want to add, Leader, just finally, is that we also need elected members to understand that this is also about community confidence. It's equally as important to me that over the next 18 weeks the grass gets cut. If people are stuck in their homes, it's got to look normal outside. And I think that's working with the ward workers as we free people, putting people back into neighbourhood services to try and make sure that the community still looks what they'd expect it. There's going to be enough stress in family. So play parts, grass get cut, weeds get done. Because we'll, you know, and I think that small demonstrations, and I wrote out to all ward managers today saying, those small demonstrations of normality are equally as important as the big stuff we're going to have to do. And that's why engagement between yourselves, if they're losing all their community events over the summer, what is it that we can do through our neighbourhood teams to do there? But actually, one of the first decisions we took was, we're not going to stop annually. People can choose not to do it. The challenge for me is around our social work staff. The hamster's wheel isn't going to stop, and therefore we really have to focus on those key workers and our frontline care staff. What is it more we can do to help and support you? So I think that we're very conscious of that, and of course, that's have the joint trade unions right at the table as we take these decisions is really helpful.
That type of work, though, is somewhere possibly we could work with communities actually, in terms of the grass cutting and keeping the place look nice. That is somewhere where volunteers could work with us to help us to do that. Oh, Councillor Driver.
Thanks, Erin. It's just a very important point that you brought up there, Gavin, with regards making sure people get a break, especially for working hard. And it's coming back to what you said earlier on about other organisations who have said, I've laid, you know, my staff have been laid off work, not laid off, but laid off work over the number of periods. And there are some big organisations in Dumfries and Galloway who have emergency planning in place, like Chapel Cross, DuPont, and places like that. So I wonder if there's discussion between those organisations and ourselves to see if there is perhaps support for our officers in doing that type of work.
Absolutely, Pat. It's not just the public sector that we're talking to. I mean, even today, Derek and I had an offer from an Outward Bound centre that the staff are there. What equipment, what can we do with it? So absolutely, we're looking to draw on that. And the conference call I was on this morning was exactly about, this isn't the third sector response. The private sector want to respond as well, and particularly those that are the big companies. So again, it's in that planning moving forward, and we'll really need it about week 4 to 6, I would suspect.
Councillor Drysdale.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of the teams within the Council, because everyone's been working flat out during these unprecedented times. Just, I think, as fellow councillors in the room, we've all been getting an awful lot of inquiries, largely down to the panic that's ensuing, which is fair enough. I mean, even today we're sitting here, I've got masses of messages from everybody in a complete and utter mental health state about the chaos going on with the shopping situation in Castle Douglas alone, but across the area. And what I've been finding is we have been getting information which has been coming through, which we're very grateful for, and it's very concise, but we're not supposed to share all of it within our communities at the moment. I know that's coming, and I don't know where we sit with Scottish Government guidelines and our procedures. And you're an excellent communicator, Richard, so I would ask that the Council maybe has a spokesperson, either yourself, Gavin, as a Chief Executive, or indeed if it has to be a key partner across the area. I don't know who that person would be, but I very much think we need to see leadership at the moment, not just across social media channels, which is where most of it is, but you have to rummage around to find it, to give your constituents answers while you're waiting for the EMS to get back to you. So if we could have once a week, if possible, I appreciate you're all under so much pressure, so I'm asking a lot here, but if there was just a 1 week press release that goes to the press and radio, because we have to understand if people are isolating, most of them will be elderly. They're likely to get a paper dropped off. They do not access social media, and that is the core of our population at the moment, and we need to be communicating clearly and succinctly with them regularly. So one person once a week to take that leadership role to communicate to our communities would be really, really appreciated at this moment in time. And that would come under the different headlines, either the cells or down to COVID-19 safety procedures, social care, food provision and supplies, community support channels, schooling, transport, business and financial support. If we could, then we can feed it in weekly, which will actually take a lot of pressure off the Council. So I would much appreciate that, but thank you for the work you're all doing.
Thanks, Councillor Drysdale. Absolutely, we'll pick that up through the comms cell. I'll speak to Mark. I think Councillor Maitland talked about the comms strategy, so that's obviously a work in progress at the moment, and I'll absolutely take that back. That's a good suggestion.
Well, thanks very much, Richard. If there's no more questions, there's no other business deemed urgent. I think that this has all been urgent enough.
That he may need a decision to go to a national group as part of the resilience or something like that. Does that need to happen today, or are you?
Obviously, I would still give a strategic lead working with the team, but we've got the model up and running. And, you know, it was just to say that members would support me taking on that national role. I would look as quickly as possible to try and give it to somebody else.
You don't need a formal decision by the Council. Yeah.
To say that, you know, and obviously my colleagues will make sure I don't do too much.
So will we. If that's all, thanks very much for your attendance, and please keep safe and keep well.